few minutes, not so long.
A few minutes.
Okay.
Short. I said short.
I'll take a 1 AR, 2 AR, just to thank a lot of people who have been really, really integral to my debate career. So I come from a school that does not do circuit debate, and all of this really started with Rebecca Kwong kind of pulling me and my teammate Rebecca Gelfer from the UNT camp, and she was incredibly supportive, and none of this would have been possible without her. Some other people that I have to thank throughout my career, Marshall Thompson, the amount of help that he's given me is ridiculous, and the only requirement that he puts on me is that I read philosophy. Sometimes I think that's a bit ridiculous, but you know. And I also have to thank my coach this year, Akil Jalan, Chris Tice, who's been the wise sage during this tournament. They've made me go to sleep early, they've stayed up late for me, and none of this would have been possible without them. And I know I'm maybe missing a lot of other people, like a bunch of friends who have been with me throughout the entire year, like Cameron and Nick as well. But my parents also have been an integral part. Everything has come out of their pockets. They've always been really compliant, really cooperative, driving me to and fro. And so none of this would have been possible without all the people who have made this experience just as valuable as it really is. So I'd like to thank all of them. Sending out the one you see. All right, just tell me when everybody's ready. Good, Nick? Mm-hmm. All right. Ready? By focusing on the thug instead of the gun, white America neglects the state's role in creating violence. Vote after reject anti-black framing that blacks are doomed to criminality from 13 brackets. For clarity, white Americans don't play guns, but a subset of the population. It's mostly a matter of thugs killing thugs, but many seeming thugs carry to protect themselves. If two people carry confrontation wins with one dead and the other in prison. Their problems do not occur in isolation, but are manifestations of society. Bad guys might not become such bad guys if they had not been available. Evidence on our side, Red Phillips, 14 brackets for clarity. There were 1,800 gang-related killings in 2011 compared to consider that there were 11,000 homicides with firearms. The number of gangs has been on the rise, but an 8% decrease in gang-related homicides. We should not see rates moving in opposite directions. When examining cities with large gang problems, gang homicides only account for 29%. The CDC also found the proportion of homicides resulting from drug hate was consistently low. Furthermore, 2005 study found that nearly 5 offenders did not have 3 in 5 offenders did not have felony conviction. 2 years prior, criminals become violent in the presence of firearms. And guns create crime. Omnipresence of guns in cities torn apart by discrimination and poverty creates an ecology of danger. This fuels an arms race for self-protection and dominates social interactions, guaranteeing a fragmented community stuck in a cycle of violence. Fagan and Wilson, 98. We examine the effect of omnipresence gun norms and behaviors in an ecology of danger. Actors presume that guns are president's behavior is regulated by knowledge that life could be taken away at any moment by guns. Guns play a big part in feeling of personal safety. The ready available guns has undoubtedly shaped our code towards expectations of lethal violence. It also sets the values of violent behavior in the social currency of the neighborhood. Displaying a willingness to take life is part of the process. Prevalence of guns coupled with rapid social diffusion shape perceptions of danger. Most young males have guns. Guns are available to just about anyone who steals them through associates, family members, or dealers. Boys are being socialized into gun use, and the street presence of guns has shaped the rules of fighting among teenagers. Fair ones no longer dominate conflict resolution. Many involve some type of gunplay. Firearms trouble logic. Once introduced it as life or death, the main strategic move reported was to take the first shot. Many events reflected beefs among groups. The reason for the ritual dispute seemed minor. However, once gunplay came into future violence was motivated by getting justice, and surrounded by gunshots, children are doomed to a cycle of poverty and violence. Rake et al. 02. Children that are exposed to gunshots experience psychological effects. All of these efforts can make youth more prone to violence. Feeding continued cycles in the inner city of Philadelphia. 3/4 had heard gunfire. Whether had seen someone shot. Exposure was correlated with a more anxiety, depression, lower GPA, and more absence from school. 19% just wished them they were dead. And gun violence kills in 2010 was 6,000. Pew Research 13 brackets for clarity. In 2010 there were 11,000 homicides from firearm energies. Blacks were 55%, but 13% of the population. Now, the text. The USFG should instruct the Treasury Department to ban handguns under their authority to regulate unsafe consumer products. Enforcement is through normal means. Violence policy center 2030 years of federal gun control legislation failed due to ad hoc nature in which gun control legislation has been enacted. A contrasting legislative approach begins with the recognition that guns are only consumer products in America, specifically exempt from health and safety requirements. Congress should vest the Department of Treasury with a strong authority to regulate the design, manufacture, and distribution of firearms. Authority should also include ability to review for the market of firearms that pose a serious threat to public health and safety. The damage wrought by some products can be controlled only by unequivocal lambda products of such 3 rules. ATVs and lawn darts had death rates of microscopic in comparison of handguns, but were nevertheless banned. A clear-cut ban to ban handguns should be implemented soon, and the plan shifts responsibility away from shooters to manufacturers. This is key to gain national consensus. Stitin 94. If the gun were treated as consumer product instead of a symbol of crime or an alien right, then the country could break free of the emotional debate over gun control. Why have we been fooled so long by looking at the person who pulls the trigger, not the person who makes the trigger? If gun makers were treated like the maker as pesticides, now reducing availability will decrease lethal violence. Fagan and Wilkinson, 2 adolescents in cities are carrying guns are largely larger scales and exogenous increase in crime availability, fueled increase in the youth violence regardless of fitness role, reducing availability would turn reduce youth violence. We consider an ecology of danger with behavioral norms and fuel belief. These effects appear large enough to justify intensive efforts to reduce availability of guns by American adolescents. A gun ban, reduce the availability of guns. The supply side approach is key. Lawful at 2K. Criminals often steal rather than for those who purchase illegally. At least 500,000 guns are still each year. It also affects the price of guns as we restrict availability. The supply of guns in the secondary market decreases and their cost increases. This will diminish teenagers' ability to obtain guns, and teenagers commit the most deadly crimes. Decreasing legal guns decreases homicides. And a gun ban kills the illicit market. New guns are key. Broad 12 research identifies 3 points. First, they rely on diverse sets of illegal pathways. Organized trafficking exists, but is not predominant. They are attractive targets for enforcement. Second, new guns are disproportionately covering crime, suggesting an important role for close to retail diversion of gun supply side approach, as well as supported by empirical evidence. The most comprehensive study ever conducted, Flows App, verifies causality. McDonald 3.2, the largest study ever conducted, found a clear link between firearm regulation and fewer gun deaths. The team reviewed 130 high-quality studies conducted in 10 states over the past 60 years. The researchers came up with 3 conclusions. Users take a major legislation overhaul. Restricting access is associated with reductions in death, and individual studies need to be better executed and planned. Preferred. A point is breadth. It reviewed over 5,000 studies. B point is predictive capacity. The study decided to either use cross-sectional time designs or compare trends in states pre and post law. C point is study inclusion. They included common negative authors like Clegg and Lock and Mustard. B point is paradigm shifts. They find evidence that the legislation that changes the gun control paradigm is more important, aka not just small gun control laws, and no substitution for Case 931 has to doubt the reliability of prisoners reckoning likely a very likely small percentage of murders were actually committed with long guns. It's more probable that someone turns to less lethal weapons or be returned. Long guns are obviously more difficult to conceal. Potential mugger wielding a long will cause everyone to flee. Handguns are more convenient. Now, the role of the balance of both the debater who methodologically challenges structural violence. Smith 13, the exclusionary atmosphere debate discourages black students from participating. Competitors attempt to run by rushing to obstructing distance from material realities that black communities deal with every day. Community norms will have competitors do intellectual gymnastics to escape party conversations, but the only constructive strategy to acknowledge the reality of the press and identify strategies to deal with the issues. Debate is not just a game, but a learning environment with liberatory potential. Skip the next card. And future narratives are a link. Predictions are not just value neutral. They're link inflation, hyperbolized scores, violence, preserves, hold them responsible. Jackson 12. The facts are simply irrefutable. You are more likely to die from lack of health care than terrorism. Yet politicians in the media spend most of the time talking about threats. This display is meant to convince you that the threats are serious. Danger is more exciting for media than stories about how poor people are discriminated against. Security's misdirection on epic scale. It functions to distract you from the structures in society that are real threats, convince you permanently afraid that you will keep the military industrial complex cooking. Now, underview-based structures that constantly criticize the status quo will represent real alternatives, feed existing power structures. People frustrated will go to reigning ideologies. Brian 12, the left falls failed to influence abstraction, is good at carrying critiques, yet poor at proposing realistic alternatives, thinking about their academic tenure, then producing change rule. This revolutionary is great friend for reactionary because they drive people into reigning ideology. We never make concrete proposals. We do critique and toxic to jump to ways that these things contain dirty secrets, early motives, and how we do anything people are dependent on production. How we meet these problems. What is the alternative? If you want to contribute to this, we are starting. I'll skip the next card and round down the risk of incredibly low probability and bets 0. 1 is Pascal's mugger. Karnowski 11. If someone explains threats to harm one person unless you give them $10, it's ought to carry more because it is more plausible lack of prior life experiences. Pascal's mugging can be thought as a point in which claims the value of action A is widely outside the prior life set experiences. This is simply a function of their enormous possible error and underground estimate making extravagant claim ought to be discarded. And policy paralysis. Resher 83. In our yearning for free risk-free society, we may create a system that makes innovation impossible. Total avoidance of risk means that society will become paralyzed and taking its resources in preventing action, denying opportunities, improving quality of life.
Can you mark and delete stuff?
There were no marked cards in the app, except for the very bottom card.
Yeah, for sure.
I didn't finish, and then just this Kymn card. Didn't have time to read my Martin Luther King card. So sad. Should be good.
Alright, you ready?
Yeah.
So how is the plan enforced? You give the Treasury the authority to declare guns a consumer product.
Congress has this congressional oversight where they can tell different.
Sure. I guess my question is how do you make people give up guns? Is it mandatory confiscation? Is there a buyback?
So our argument is that the gun becomes banned. Local enforcers might want to confiscate if they're seeing. It's just like lawn darts.
Let's say you're on the firearm registry, you own a handgun, but it's at your house. Do they come to your house and take it? Do they just stop sales?
The plan says that what happens is Congress gives and tells the Department of Treasury that they should ban guns via this justification.
Sure, so how do they actually enforce
So let me explain. So the USFG, first of all, just cuts off manufacturing of handguns.
Okay.
That's the first thing. The second thing it says is that obviously if there are federal agents like the ATF, they would, if they saw a handgun,
Sorry, let's take a step back. You stop manufacturing of handguns? That seems extra to you.
That's definitely not extra topical. If the private ownership of handguns
is about banning private ownership.
If the private ownership of handguns is banned within the United States, then private corporations cannot manufacture them.
Okay, you're saying corporations own the guns?
Who else manufactures guns?
Let's talk. Okay, so you still haven't answered my question. If you own a gun, do people come to your house?
I'm answering this question.
Okay.
First first thing is that if it is a national federal registry and the ATF wants to do that, yes, they would confiscate the gun. The second, though, is on a state level. It would be up to the state's jurisdiction.
Which piece of solvency evidence is specific to the plan mechanism?
I think all of them talk about a gun
they're
ban.
about the Treasury granting authority, or the Congress granting authority.
So all of these arguments talk about how a gun ban would be good. If you want to make solvency
what were the solvency
then we can make
mechanisms
arguments
used in
about
your
this.
evidence?
What do you mean?
I'm talking buyback programs or mandatory confiscation.
I'm so confused by
which pieces of your solvency evidence is clearly not about the specific.
It's about a gun
mechanism
ban.
of your. It's about a gun ban.
I don't think there's any difference from the AF. I think the AF just has a better enforcement mechanism than most general AFs. You can make arguments in
let's talk about the solvency
one
evidence some more. Which card says handguns specifically, besides just the Dixon 93 no substitution?
The Fagan-Wilkinson evidence.
Okay, where does that talk about a handgun ban?
I mean, it doesn't.
So it doesn't say handguns.
No, the Fagan and Wilkinson 2 evidence indicates that, based on their conclusion, decreasing the availability of guns would be a positive thing for inner city crime.
Yeah, it says the availability of guns in general, not handguns.
Yes, but its entire study is about handguns. We also have great
evidence. Since you obviously, nowhere in the card does it say handguns, what do you mean the entire study is about handguns?
Okay.
It doesn't say that once.
I mean, look, I read this. This is like a really long article, and I read the article.
It says guns, youth violence,
yeah, dude, not everybody in the literature.
I'm not just going to trust you that your card.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, we have good evidence in the Dixon evidence that indicates that a large amount of crime committed in inner cities is handguns, which means they're obviously talking about handguns.
The only card in the AF that says the word handguns is Dixon, right?
I mean, let's do a control F. I don't remember at this point. This is a new AF. I haven't gotten to read it in a while.
Okay.
Oh, the first card, the from card, also says it.
Alright, got you. I will take it. What part of the AF is its structural violence specifically, which is the text of your roll about? It seems like
you don't think inner city violence.
It seems like you just stopped homicide.
Just homicide?
Yeah. How do you reverse the structural problem?
Our argument is that guns are criminogenic and contribute to the overall structure that society has imposed upon urban cities that make it such that there is an arms race, so they're forced to kill each other. How is that not structural violence? Send it out. I have a little speech of my own.
On behalf of Cameron and I'd like to take a moment to thank a lot of my great friends and peers in debate who've made this activity so meaningful for me. First of all, I'd like to thank the University of Kentucky and the tournament staff for hosting such an amazing tournament. I'd like to thank Beats for being a great mentor to me for the past 4 years and making this whole debate experience super, super meaningful. I'd also like to thank some of my other coaches who are also some of my best friends, Travis, Danny, Daniel, Jake Sonnenberg, who flew out for the weekend, which was super awesome. Also my teammates who came to the tournament, Indu, Connor, and Evan. I'm super stoked for you guys, and I know that you're going to have great debate careers, and I'm super happy for you all. I'd also like to thank Harvard-Westlake for letting me participate in debate the last couple of years. It definitely changed my high school experience, and this is something I'll never forget. I'd also like to thank Cameron personally for being the best teammate I could ask for. He's always pushed me to work harder and to improve myself, and we've been through lots and lots of tournaments together, and I can say nothing but positive things about it. Seriously, this whole experience has been awesome, and you've been an amazing friend and teammate. And with that, I'd like to send out the 1NC.
Set?
Almost.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, the order is 2.
Hang on a second, I don't have this.
Okay.
You, Chris?
Yeah, I just sent
Okay,
it.
got it.
The order is 2, then case, starting at the underview stuff, then just top down, and then a third off at the end.
Third off at the end?
Yeah.
All right. So is there a chance you don't do the third off? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's fine. It's like, it's weird. We need another sheet out just for this.
All right.
Yeah.
Everyone good?
First, I critique the app overlooks the necessary survival strategy of trans people of color self-defense. They cannot rely on the police force. Article 13 is mostly trans people of color who get targeted through gun control laws, or criminal laws, and criminal legal system that targets trans people of color. Trans people disproportionate arrest, prosecuting, sentencing, and punishment. Trans people of color heavily targeted for institutional violence, and they are particularly unlikely to be able to rely on the police for protection. Those who would choose to have guns for self-defense should not be punished. Also outweighs the government is a more powerful institution, more resources than individual gun violence. Even if gun violence is bad, mass incarceration is larger and more versatile. And queerness and transmits are the absence of capacity, the derelict object against which human relations are formed. Stanley 11. Words target my waiting body. They target violent fantasies that desire to my corporal enduring. Feel everyday death and waiting. Queerness is produced through the negativity of forced death in the threshold of obliteration. The making of corporalities constituting social is empty, meaning anti-queer violence more often than not is correctly leveled against queers. The fact that queers endure evidences and objects can endure resist structural rejection, non-recognition, and corporal violence as a signifier with no meaning of its own, making queerness the non-meaning history in the embodied practice of feeling queer at a particular time, place, body, and time, and against an identity that assumes a prior unity. Queer disrupts this coherence as a collective negativity void of its subject, but named as object retroactively visible through the hope of a radical politics and anti-trans and queer violence is overkill. Rational legal methods cannot solve war. And 13 overkill exceed the violence of utility of violence whose end is simply to reproduce the pleasure that constitutes a physical death is not sufficient to achieve the intervention constitutes and mutilate the body. The surplus violence attempts an impossible existential objective to push queers out of time to inadequacy. Humanist instruments to address these violations, e.g. rights, equal protection. No one cannot rely on rational instruments to resolve an irrational dilemma. The horror of overkill that any situation would have to reside outside of normal times. The 1AC, the alternative is a trans rage rebelling against the violent law that inscribes sex onto bodies as a precondition of subjectivity. The raging trans body can fundamentally underline the ontological category category of the gender human subject striker. 06 trans rage with the experience of being compelled to transgress the gender schemata that determine the viability of body. Transgender rage is a career theory for survival by mobilizing gendered identities. Open to strategic occupation rage enables subject to new buzz for disidentification. Stigma becomes a source of transformative higher gendering. Balance as a founding condition of human subjectivity. The possibility of meaningful agency exists in high term by worth as a monster in spite of the life and redefine a life fulfilling constituting ourselves on our own terms against a natural order. Solve the case the forms of contingent violence they identify played on the plane of ontological category of non-human which legitimizes the extermination of marginalized groups. Referencing this category as a prerequisite. Otherwise violence is a natural second. The disadjust is being blocked now, but lots of votes are up in the air. RT 421 is currently being blocked. That requires 60 Senate votes to overcome. No vote has been scheduled. The White House has been lobbying against proposal despite support among Democrats in the Senate. Many top Republicans to refuse to support or oppose the legislation, saying they need time in the office. Political self-destruction for Democrats. Your plan text definitely still links since it is Congress explicitly authorizing sure 15 politicians avoid handgun bans because of positions that fit for exempting responsible gun from regulation. Politicians are loath to advocate the government take their guns away. This is a political impossibility. Republican Congress won't even pass background checks at handgun ban is not a cause and roll back the gun industry blocks all advocates at regulating guns. Israel 15. Nothing is likely to change action on gun violence. It's always a possibility attempt to pass even common sense reforms appears that are level gun law being preempted. This sort of tactics the anti-smoking activists used by changing federal and state laws fundamentally to like every single one of the approaches you can use to undermine the firearm industries. And the PC is key to sustain the veto decoid for 18 Obama administration and the full court law being pressed on lawmakers keep the bill from passing. Obama's vetoes have enabled the commander to get some things accomplished. Obama loses the battle and have far-reaching and devastating effects on the U.S. and world economies, jeopardize the relations in the fight against IS, causes global war, outflows all 15. The world is about to change war on terror to World War III terrorist organization, posing a major threat, militants or a disaster for the region. There is a global asset against IS fighting here to spread to other parts of the world. India, Pakistan, East China Sea. The U.S. will be first to respond. Also outweighs the case first magnitude. It causes worldwide structural violence and massive suffering via poverty, environment, degradation. They solve a couple thousand cases of homicide at best. Also turns case war idealizes the strong autonomous subject and also creates post-war hierarchies where those at the bottom will be marginalized. Also prioritize life existence as a prerequisite to moral truth and other values. Now the framing arguments at the bottom of the case, you say that Johnson evidence that predictions are bad. First, the entire app is also a prediction based on empirical evidence. Just because we have a couple more links here doesn't mean that we link to your structural violence arguments. Also, we are not motivated by bad things because we said that the disad turns case, which means that the SQO is a liberation strategy. We just say that the app is something worse. Also, we underestimate high impact scenarios, which means because we do think that they will never actually happen, so they're actually more likely to come true, which means that it is better for engagement to actually acknowledge that these risks will happen because it's worse for structural violence. Now, the Bryant evidence versus the link to the critique trying to tie us down to one coherent demand is the same as one sexual identity. You does not recognize that queerness is the absence of identity in the first place, so it begs the question. Also, your right-wing backlash arguments are non-unique. If we win the uniqueness question, that is happening on a massive scale to queer bodies and the status quo. Also, backlash is a form of victim blaming. It says that queer people should not try to liberate themselves because straight people will get mad at them and try to screw them over. It's also just to justify that the state is a good thing. It just says that coherent demands on politics are good, but also that means that they will always be co-opted because of serial policy failure and elites are in control of politics in the first place. Also, role-playing creates psychological violence and assumes objective detachment from personal identity that causes imperialism. We quickly await the policymaker and debate comes with detachment associated with spectator posture. Participants distance themselves from the subjects of the debate. We call for USDG policymaking, not immune to the colonial legacies established to replace the objective stance of the policymakers. Imperialist such a stance linked to normative historical practice, power that produce oppression, discursive practice, embodied it, are developed within systems of privilege and opinions and addictive form of self-simulation that breeds self-hatred and causes tyranny because we always externalize our agency to the government, so we are never actually able to solve problems ourselves. Now, the case proper. First, turn a handgun ban causes massive policing, incarceration of marginalized groups. Gorovich 15. Gun control means writing more criminals, creating more crimes, therefore creating more criminals, more prefects for a militarized breed full of racial prejudice, multiple police killings of unarmed black men. Remind us the police operate with barely stopping constrained force response to stop and mass incarceration to monitoring. Police subject these populations to control, and a national gun ban will cause a massive increase of government militarization. Meta 15. Federal law require national police action involving thousands of lawmen. Someone would have to take the guns out of Americans' hands. Australia signing gun control require government force on a massive scale. Gun confiscation would have to be administered by force of armed. Only real police can enforce Australian gun control scheme in the U.S. And there's also a substitution effect. Cobalt 93 when handgun breeds are usually survivable. Stock are much more fatal. While Australian Canada, the handgun homicide rate is lower than expressed with the total homicide rate is over 100% greater. 30% of persons attempting homicide switch from handguns, so long as total homicide would increase. 72% of handgun criminals said that they would switch to sawed-off shotguns. You say that criminals lie, but that we are going to take that into account. Cobalt's 93 criminals may be highly suspicious of distrustful of 30 prisoners. Believe polling might be set up to discern their plan. The criminals said they would not substitute. 77% of the criminals said that they would substitute. Only 30% substitution needed to increase substantially homicide. There's wide range for error to assume that bragging criminals outnumber the suspicion ones. Also, you should be extremely skeptical of the 1AC solvency. Cross-check is pretty clear that literally none of your solvency evidence is in the context of handguns specifically and not in the context of your enforcement mechanism. Also, more solvency stuff. The U.S. does not have the funding or infrastructure to enforce gun bans. Vanico is 6. A judgment deciding the government remove provisions not important and refuse to impose the ban. Many states lack infrastructure, repositories, law enforcement necessary to confiscate weapons. States have no system to inform of the gun bans, and no one will comply anyways. Kids 13 most owners do not comply with the ban. The owners will not register their firearms and pays away for confiscation. Efforts to ban weapons are overwhelmingly ignored. The rate of compliance estimated at 1%. Sorry, now the other probability arguments at the bottom of the app. This just says that you reject high probability scenarios, but that begs the question of whether you win the link chain of the disad is bad in the first place. Obviously, if we win the links that is probable, but also you should multiply probability and magnitude, because that is key to real world framing. That's how we make decisions. You should not arbitrarily reject high probability impacts. More turns. Massive review of literature doesn't prove that gun control doesn't affect violent cases. In Malboro 7, 2004, the U.S. National Academy of Science released its evaluation from 253 journals, 99 books, 43 government publications, and research failed to identify any gun control that reduced violent crime. The same conclusion was reduced by the U.S. CDC. Also, do not let him go for this vague cultural shift solvency in the next speech, because if we prove that material violence increases, it means that we're most directly affecting those issues. Culture doesn't solve anything.
Okay, can you just delete and reorganize?
Yes.
Yeah, the ones he was solving, please.
Well, I just didn't read that. So, I guess
Just
fine.
It doesn't matter.
Okay,
Like,
sure.
yeah.
You
You didn't read this, you just analytically
Right,
read the argument.
right.
Okay. I'll do the
Okay.
deleting because, like,
Sounds good.
yeah, you seem
kinda
to know.
weird.
Yeah. Wait, you have Mac there.
Yeah, but I didn't do it.
This you didn't read, right?
Correct.
Alright.
No illegal market.
Okay. No, this is mass review.
Right,
Right.
this one.
Okay.
And then this one.
No Vanek, right?
No, I read it. I didn't read
Okay.
that. Alright, that's all.
And then all this was read?
Yeah.
Okay. Alright. Is everybody ready?
Yep.
Alright. I want to start at the very bottom of the 1AC. You say that the Bryant evidence is a form of victim blaming because the argument says that trying to liberate ourselves will cause backlash, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Your
is this
argument
not-
is literally
So, great.
people will get mad if
no,
people
no.
try to be people.
I mean,
which
I'll
is
recontextualize
not good.
that. I don't think that's the
Okay.
case. But
Okay.
why does
I think
that
that is
not link to
definitely the
politics? Why isn't politics a form of victim blaming? Your argument is literally...
Because politics, the key to... Okay, there are
Your
four-
argument is literally Republicans
No, my argument
will
is
be like, nah,
literally
we don't
that
want to save
the
black
AF
people.
My argument is literally that the AF will pass a plan that will lead to global
Yeah, and
war,
our
that
argument is
a bad
that
thing.
your method
We
of
don't say
engagement...
Republicans good, and politics is not an advocacy.
Oh, so we said white people good when they backlash.
No, the
There seems
key
to be no
the key
Alright, what's
distinction
Jasta?
is that
What is
politics
Jasta?
is not an advocacy,
What is
but
Jasta?
actively defending the U.S.
What is Jasta?
Jasta is the deal with Saudi Arabia. It's a question over whether or not Saudi Arabia had any involvement in 9/11.
Okay, so what is the bill currently, like, if it doesn't pass, what happens? Like, does that mean we default assume that Saudi Arabia was involved?
Sorry, what is your question?
Like, if the bill does not pass, does that mean, like, Congress default assumes the bill, like, Saudi Arabia was involved?
Yes.
Like, I don't understand. Really? Like, the evidence says
No.
that?
It's the opposite of that. Our argument is the bill will not be passed now. We do not want the bill to be passed. That will.
Oh,
destroy
so your
Saudi
argument is the
relations.
bill will pass if...
No. Yes,
If the plan passes, why?
because Obama's more likely to veto.
Wait,
Obama will not be able to veto.
why not?
Your
You can just
question
stamp
confused me.
veto.
No.
It's
The
done.
argument is the bill will not pass now because Obama has the capacity to veto. Our argument is that
And he doesn't?
you destroy Obama's political capital and ability to
And
veto.
when do you establish
which means
that
there will be no
Obama's political capital is essential to him stamping the veto?
Wait, that is the let's see, which card is that? The Digwood 418
Alright,
evidence. It
let's go
says
through
that
this.
the Obama administration has a full court lobbying press now on lawmakers to
Yes.
keep the bill from passing.
Obama's vetoes have
if he
kept him
loses.
from getting things accomplished. Great. It doesn't say anything.
The argument is that right now he has
Alright,
the
that's
power
fine.
to veto.
Let's talk about the
That's
critique.
what Polkat gives him.
Let's talk about the
Handgun ban
critique.
destroys that, which
Let's
is
talk about the
different.
critique. Your Warren Evans seems to make an overkill claim. Where do you establish that all of society has overkill?
Well, the Warren evidence is pretty clear.
It describes
It's a
what
question of the
overkill is.
No,
Where do you
that's,
show
that's
that is
absolutely not true. It says
Alright,
that
read a line that
humanist
says...
entrants are inadequate to address violations, i.e. of overkill.
Yeah, that's a
Then it
claim.
gives
I want...
examples.
That is based on the
Wait,
idea
what is
that
your question?
overkill is something that is structurally embedded within civil society. I
that
want
is
the
the
warrant
argument.
for that claim.
Well, the warrant. Well, there are a couple of.
There is
different-
no warrant in
no,
warrant.
there
Okay,
are.
fantastic.
Wait, that's not. I was
Alright,
about
then-
to explain it.
go
to
ahead,
you. There are a couple
explain
of
it.
different warrants. For example, the killing of Lauren Page, the killing of people like
So,
Rashad
the killing of
Brazell,
one
the
person
targeting of people
shows
like
that
Matthew
the
Shepard.
entire
No,
society...
it's not the killing of one person. That is literally our link argument because you
Okay,
refuse to recognize.
where
the
have you
fact
shown
as
a single...
systemic.
Do you have a single piece of empirical evidence that says self-defense for transgender individuals is effective?
Okay, so I think there are a couple issues.
I want a piece of evidence. I want a piece
article's
of
evidence says that even if it doesn't meet your criteria of effective, it's a necessary
That's
survival strategy
That's fine.
because it's not a. Okay. Like, they're not going to be able to rely on the police or the state to help them. That's our argument.
Status of the alternative?
What do you want it to be?
Unconditional,
That's
obviously. Okay. What's the scenario for war? Is it Saudi Arabia war or is it just war?
It says that multiple. Well, first of all, it says that the conflict would spread outside of the region, i.e., places like.
And why would
India,
Saudi Arabia
Pakistan.
have war with the United States? Because this.
No, the argument is that U.S. needs Saudi relations to be able to contain the spread of ISIS, which will spread to other places.
Wow.
It's not Saudi Arabia war. It's Saudi Arabia key for not having a big war.
All right. 40. Order's going to be case, the dissad, and then the critique. Case in the order of top down, and then the underview.
Sorry, do it one more time, please.
Yeah. Case, the dissad, and then the critique. Here, let me email.
So just top down on kids.
All right.
Wait, you just sent that out again.
Yeah, you sent the
Shoot. Okay. It's at the very top of the app, but I suppose you just didn't save. All right. Is everybody ready? Yeah. Everybody?
Yep.
It's easy to think that guns aren't the problem since it's rooted in anti-black representations, but blacks are not inherently criminal. They too own guns for self-defense, that they farm evidence, extend to fake and evidence gun are criminogenic. They create an arms race for self-protection that socialize adolescents into lethal violence. Concession of this has multiple implications. First, an anti-substitution. They own guns for self-defense and will replace the long guns. They're too bulky and inconvenient. You should also be skeptical that their prisoner surveys about repeat felons are indicative of the people that we were talking about. Arda Phillips indicate that only 3 in 5 of those individuals did not have a felon status, which means your survey is not indicative, which means even your answers about the percentage claims do not matter. Also, answer self-defense. The expectation of death means flashing a gun is an invitation to shoot quicker, which spawns future retaliation. Directly impact turns. The critique indicates that you might not be able to rely on the state, but you cannot rely on the gun either. The state exactly gives you the gun such that you create an arms race such that you kill your own people, which means that it is a bigger impact. Moreover, defensive gun use does not imply life was saved. Now, the impacts gun violence kills thousands, blocks communities, and cycle poverty and crime. That's our rank evidence. The rank evidence also magnifies our impact. Exposure has psychological effects that lock children to cycle crime. Thus, we outweigh substitution. Even if there are more fatalities, there are drastic shootings. Now, the solvency is pretty clear. One is that fake proves that guns cause crime, so removing them decrease death. It's reverse causal. Lafayette also shows that banning legal production is key. Illicit exchanges are supplied by legal sources, which means that we produce used athletes because the supplies increase, which means that even if there's a current supply, it's irrelevant. Praga also answers your no compliance claims because it indicates that new guns are mainly recovered in crimes, which means unrecovered crimes will quickly become obsolete, and moreover, perception is sufficient. Bans mean that they're harder to purchase or steal, which shapes youth expectation of gun prevalence. Pagan proves that those expectations are what cause crimes. Now, obviously, the case-solving arguments answers your arguments about Gorbich because there's no guns to enforce in the first place. Furthermore, you've misunderstood the plan text argument is that we should ban it because it is a bad consumer product, just like lawn darts. That does not mean we criminalize it, which means that you don't know if these arguments actually impact your meta evidence has no impact, even if it is the case that you would have to go door to door because registry said, which just means we confiscate it, which means that ultimately there's not a large impact. Substitution effects already answer. You say be skeptical, but last you say that the United States will not enforce. We cut off manufacturing, which means that we collapse the NRA, but also that there are no new guns, which is the internal link to our solvency. Now, the dissent. Here's the problem with the dissent. It makes absolutely no sense in context of the app. Our app says that congressional oversight will say that the Treasury Department should enforce the app, which means that Obama doesn't have to sign it, which means that Democrats within Congress who are the minority are not even part of the decision, which means that it would not hurt Democratic poll cap, it would hurt the Republican poll cap, which means that this argument about vetoing does not make sense. Also, your term leak evidence is terrible on this question. It just says that Obama needs political capital and that he can veto things. It doesn't make a link between those two arguments. Furthermore, your scenario is really, really terrible because it says that there's a chance that Saudi Arabia might escalate or that our relations are killed. Saudi Arabia also needs to check against ISIS, which means that just because the bill does not, it gets passed, does not mean Saudi Arabia will not go. Furthermore, there is no war. Rob 2012, the area may be war behind us. Major powers have been at peace for nearly 7 decades. Today's global politics are tempered by permanent organizations, regional military alliances, formal economic partnerships, in addition to geopolitical and diplomacy issues. Globalization continues to transform the world. The interdependence has blurred the lines between economic security, physical security. Cut the card there proves that there will still be cooperation and that there will be no escalation. Means that our impact outweighs 6,000 black Americans die yearly, which means that the impact over a decade is 60,000 longer even than that. Now, the critique, here is the problem with the critique. The case is an impact turn, so that indicates that yes, you might be correct, they cannot rely on the state, but they also cannot rely on the gun either. Furthermore, our arguments prove that that is the act of creation that they want, so that your society looks like it is a criminal society, which justified these things like overkill in the first place. The case solves the impact. Furthermore, we do not say that we will criminalize them. That was the argument on Gorbich, which means that does not link. Now, you say that there's overkill, but this is just a descriptive claim of what overkill is. Does not make a single explanation as to why all of society is like that, which means the permutation should be able to resolve the impact. Also, there's no reason as to why, just because there's a first choice between whether or not queer should be able to have gun and whether or not queer individuals should be able not to have gun and protect themselves, even if it's ineffectual, does not mean the permutation does not solve. The fact that there are so many other policies that are anti-queer within the status quo means that if they cannot resolve those, then that means that the alternative is not sufficient. So permutation do both. We should rebel against the violent law that describes sex into bodies as a precondition of subjectivity, we'll also do the AF to understand that the AF is necessary in order to decriminalize or decriminalize the identity of black individuals who are in those communities. The case also outweighs because it has a tangible impact. Now, I will do the extension of the Bryant evidence here. You say victim blaming. That also applies to politics. CX was pretty clear on that. But furthermore, the argument is not that you do not create anything. The argument is that you cannot create any substantial change. The 1AC's reading does not give queer individuals any possibility because their own affirmation of their identity does not translate into political actions, which means that they are still defined as a state by criminal, which means only the affirmative has the possibility of shifting the identity and producing anything.
Okay, can you just delete stuff?
Yeah. All right. Should be good.
What are the answers to the Gorovitch argument specifically, besides you don't criminalize?
So I also make a case outweighs argument, and then the extension of the AF would seem to say that we control the root cause because guns are criminogenic in the first place, which means that we are the reason why there is a justification for criminalization of black individuals.
It's going to be critique, then case. And there's going to be a K overview.
Are you reading these?
No. Alright. Is everyone good? Alright.
The one here massively misunderstands the critique. Our argument is that queerness is a structural, ontological position that cannot be resolved by rational legal procedures. If we win the ontology claim, it means that it's try or die for the negative. All of your arguments presume that practical legal solutions are a good thing, or that working within the law is actually effective enough to create a cultural shift where people will stop where, for example, straight people will stop pathologizing queers, or white people will stop pathologizing black people. But all of our ontology uniqueness arguments say that cultural shift is fundamentally impossible. Way that heteronormative normative civil society is constructed. So I'll extend those warrants here. The concession of the Stanley evidence is particularly damning. It says that queerness is inherently non-identity and cannot be incorporated into legal categories. Trying to have one static definition of queerness inherently leads to its eradication by trying to tie it down to something incoherent. It also says that queer culture is inevitably pathologized and eradicated in society, which means that all of your arguments about why people will now recognize people as not being criminals or how there will be a cultural mindset shift is the link to our argument, because your assumption that a legal change is sufficient to do that begs the question of who gets access to that shift in the first place. And all of our uniqueness evidence says that nothing the 1AC does will ever do anything for queer people. The next argument I'm going for is Warren 13 just says that anti-queer violence is gratuitous and a function of overkill. There are empirical examples that prove this. For example, the way that Lauren Page, Matthew Shepard, people like Rashawn Brazel were viciously murdered and then stabbed past death thousands of times past the point of utility means that overkill and anti-queer violence is not something that can be ever solved within rationalist procedures of the law. Your assumption that passing a gun ban will work to solve that violence is our link argument, which means that it is try or die for the negative, and there is no net benefit to the permutation. Now, the second overview I'm going for is role-playing bad. Fiat is illusory. The plan does not actually pass in the real world, which means that you do not get to weigh your quote-unquote material solvency impacts because you do not actually do anything to solve anything for anyone. However, you have conceded two distinct role-playing bad arguments on the case, which I will weigh here. These are a prerequisite for you being able to weigh solvency. First, you have conceded the Reed-Brinkley evidence, which says that role-playing assumes that you can just attach your personal identity from the political stance you take, but that recreates imperialism. For example, you force queer people to role-play their oppressors, or you put black people in the position where they have to role-play a colonialist legacy, which means that you do not get access to any of the 1AC case offense or any of the permutation arguments, because that already presumes that that is a good educational model. Your Bryant evidence also does not answer this specifically, because it just says that we need pragmatic strategies, but it does not say that role-playing the state is good, which means that this is an independent reason that you vote negative, and it was a straight-up conceded argument. Now, I will line by line your arguments. Your first argument is that the case impact terms because you solve criminalization. First, I will answer the empirical question on the case debate, but this is also our link argument, because nothing in the 1AC says that legal change is sufficient to solve that, and if we win the structural position or the question of ontology, means that you do not actually solve that. Also, non-unique, our ontology arguments prove that criminalization is inevitable in the status quo. Our article's evidence says that trans people will be pathologized no matter what the police do, and more police enforcement of a gun ban will just lead to more pathologization, so you do not actually solve anything. This next argument, no link, because you say no criminalization as per Gorovich, but Crosschex was pretty clear that even if you do not criminalize it, you would still have to defend people going door to door to take away guns from people, which means that you still link to our Gorovich argument, and I'll get to that more explicitly on case you say that overkill is just a descriptive claim, but no, it is not. It is a fundamental question of the ontological position of queerness in society, and even if you answer I gave the specific examples of the overkill argument in the overview, but also your answer to overkill does not answer the Stanley argument specifically, which was never addressed, which means that no 2AR responses to that argument. You said that there are other policies in the status quo that the alt needs to resolve, but there's no reason to include the AF if there's no net benefit, and all of our ontology leak arguments are disadds to the permutation. It's not a question of the alternative solving everything, because fiat is illusory, but rather it's a question of the educational stance that you take in the debate round, which means that there is an obligation to reject every single instance, because that will always only criminalize queer people. You say you perm do both at the same time. This is, first of all, severance, because the text of alternative is to reject a legalistic approach, and you include that in the text of a permutation, so you would have to sever of legalism, which destroys a negative strategy and ability to respond to that. I cannot make new arguments against that in the 2AR, but also I have proven that the app will still link. Now, the Bryant argument. First, this is the link to our argument, because your assumption that we need to define queerness as something that is coherent or something that is a static identity is that what will always let it be co-opted in the first place. This also begs the question of whether your political activism is good. All of our ontology arguments prove that that is impossible in terms of solving structural change for black people. Also, the fiat is illusory argument still apply to this argument, which means that you do not get to weigh the case, and there's no benefit to incorporating your quote-unquote political strategy, because it will never do anything. Now, the case arguments, the framation, I'm going for the Gorovich evidence. It outweighs the case because it's a point the state is a more powerful institution than individual gun violence. Sure, you may solve a couple of thousand homicides. However, the prison industrial complex incarcerates literally tens of thousands of black people, and also is more powerful than individual gun violence. It's a point it controls the root cause, because it causes alienation and poverty and isolation from the communities, which you isolate as a root cause of gun violence. You have a couple pretty bad responses. First is that you do not criminalize, but Crosschex was clear you still would defend police agents going door to door, which means they would still arrest disproportionate amounts of black people, even if there is not criminalized. It gives the police an excuse to go into those neighborhoods. You say that you can control the root cause, but obviously no. The reason that police criminalize black people is not because there are guns present. This is the entire link to our criticism argument. It's about the structural position of people in society. Police will be racist whether or or not you take guns away. You do not recognize that cops are still racist. You definitely do not control the root cause. I've already answered that case outweighs arguments. Next argument I'm going for is the no compliance argument. You get literally no solvency on the case. Our case evidence says that like 1% of people would comply with a handgun ban in the first switch, which means that all of your evidence assumes that a handgun ban specifically would be able to solve a vast majority of your impacts, but you can cross-apply my argument that none of the 1AC evidence is specific to handgun bans, just gun bans in general, and your own self-defense arguments say that people would be more likely to want to hold on to their handguns, which means that none of your solvency evidence actually applies. You only solve like 1% of the case, so the critique outweighs anyways.
Alright, I had a minute, or what was it again? 40? 40?
40 seconds.
Alright, 40. The order is going to be an overview. That's going to, you can flow that next to where you flowed Nick's extensions of the rolled ballot. And then it's going to be a case, and then it's going to be the critique. All right. Is everybody ready? You are right that the 2-hour would have been super easy if I did not concede the role-playing bad arguments, but this just makes my law slightly harder. If we win the perm debate, then it resolves all of your impacts because it indicates that we are capable of both affirming our own individual agency without doing the nihilism or the political nihilism that you talk about in your role-playing bad arguments or the cycle of violence, and craft those into demands that take material strategy to decriminalize black and queer bodies. Furthermore, your read-linkly evidence, at the very best, is just a reason as to why you should not automatically discard the alternative because it is not a policy option, but I am not committing psychological violence onto myself by affirming, which means my choice to engage in material argument cannot have a pre-fiat impact like that, which means it is not relevant. Now, if the F was role-playing, the permutation definitely is not. The K is unconditional, which means if I win the perm, it is sufficient. You also do not have a great link to the affirmative that explains why any policy can possibly hurt our debater's agency. Now, the last argument you have is a fiat is illusory claim. First of all, this was new in the 2-hour. The 1 and C arguments did not read that. You said it was a simulation, which was not impacted to a reason as to why the case does not happen. Our argument is pretty clear in the 1AC as well as the permutation, which is that the 1AC is a different political strategy. Your alternative is also illusory in the same sense because it only happens within this round. But the question becomes, as political advocates or as debaters in a space of libertary potential, what is the political strategy that we should debate about and promote to the judges, promote as the best methodology for discussion? You say that it is one that says engage in a certain trans rage. I say that it is the permutation, which means that the fiat arguments does not mean the case goes away as long as I win. That is an important part of engagement. Now, to the case debate. You have only made 2 extensions. The first extension is the Gorvich argument that says that they will criminalize them anyways and that they go to door to door. Here is the problem, which is that we do not arrest them. You say that it'll give them an excuse. Of course not, because the plan does not give the people any excuse to arrest these people, which means that it does not solve. And the second problem here is that you've conceded that the reason why people go to the prison industrial complex anyways is because of the criminogenic environment that they save. The fake evidence indicates that you create an arms race within each other, which will be a strong framing issue on the K debate. Now, the last argument you extend is the no compliance, but you've conceded 2 arguments. The first is the fake and Wilkinson 2 evidence, which indicates that it is caused by perception. When you feel like every single person has a gun, that means they have to get a gun, but if you have a ban, it shifts the perception. That was conceded in the 1AR. The second argument is the Brock evidence, which indicates that low compliance is not a problem because new guns are recovered, which means that over time it would be out, which means the case definitely solves, not the critique. Now, here is the framing issue. Even if I lose the ontology debate, it is irrelevant because the case and the 1AR goes for 2 arguments. The first is the argument about how it can shift the viewpoint of white people, but the second one is about if in that community, you might be correct that white people will always see trans people as something that is outside of society, but my argument is that the gut in the existence of them is the tactic by the white liberal state to infiltrate these communities with guns so that they are created arms race such that they kill each other, which means that the permutation is definitely better. I did not concede the alt solves case argument because the impact turn argument that I made in the 1AR proves that you cannot solve case if you include guns because it fractures your alternative. Now, the last argument you have conceded is the permutation resolves 100% of the critique because our permutation was do the AF and do the trans wage, which should solve otherwise past legislation that was anti-trans would not be able to solve, which means if the alternative is strong enough to solve for the case as well as the status quo, it has to be strong enough to solve for the inclusion of the AF, which means the permutation is better to ensure that we have solidarity within our own communities, not from white impact.
I don't know anything about you.
just do something like so impressive, like maybe it was like Emery or something, and you would like tripped going into the room or something, and then just like stood up just hold your and fuck you, and it's just like the weirdest like clumsiness combined, just like what the fuck you masturbate. I told you, bro. Just don't talk to them. No, I mean, every time you say that, every time you like don't accept it in between stages, secretly like you're gonna accept it in between. I asked Molly to prom via cake. My mom helped me bake a cake. That's so fun. Prom.
We're ready if Mr. Kymn would like to return. You may.
Where's FT?
You want to hand that? I want no part of this. You want no part of this.
I was chastised for undressing, redressing.
Or not.
Yeah, Chris Wright. He was like, undressing already, feeling the judgment.
Are we here? Is everybody who wants to be here here? All right.
All right, this is kind of ratchet. I'm just gonna stop. Just gonna stop temporarily.
Congratulations to both debaters. It was a fine debate. Let's have another round of applause. At the end of the round, it is is a 2-1 decision in favor of the negative from Harvard-Westlake. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
All right, I can start. I'm the squirrel. So this is how my RFP breaks down. So first question I ask is, does the app have access to case offense? And I end up thinking that it does. So first question that I have to resolve then is whether or not how these role-playing arguments interact with the offense back on case. And this is what I end up thinking. So I think there are a couple different ways to interpret these role-playing arguments. Either it's reasons for why the strategy is bad itself, or reasons for why we should not evaluate debate underneath role-playing. But I think that the two are but first off, I think that the argument is that these arguments are reasons for why you cannot weigh the case against the K is a new implication coming out of 2NR, which means that I evaluate the 2A response to that. The 2A response to that is that there's no forcing of the AF to defend some kind of policy-making paradigm, which means that great, that means access to the neg alternative, for example, and that might be some kind of disadvantage to resolving the arguments on case. But I think the 2A is right in pointing out that firstly, the AF is also a different kind of political strategy. It doesn't matter if fiat is illusory because the alternative is also some kind of imagined course of action as well. And I think that he ends up being able to weigh it against it because the argument's being extended for why you can't weigh against cases. It ruled about a policy-making forces people to role-play the oppressors, but that's the arguments doesn't seem to be forcing anyone to roleplay in any sort of way. So I think he ends up being able to access weighing arguments on case. So then I get to case, and I think that Nick, I think you're just getting to these arguments with a little bit too little time. So on the criminalization argument, I resolve it by saying that there is no criminal punishment. That's what the 1A and 2A tells me. And then on the no compliance argument, there are a couple solvency arguments that I have from the Fagan and Wilkinson evidence that seem to be reasons why at least solving manufacturing gives him a pretty substantial risk of solving for case. Maybe there is still some non-compliance, but I think that there is some offense there. So then I second question is whether or not the neg is able to solve for some kind of problem underneath a rolled ballot. And I think this debate could be made a lot clearer based off the fact that there's no real roll the ballot framing in the round as to why the K comes first and the case comes first. And I think that could have made this RFD a lot simpler. But as it is, I end up thinking that there's not a very clear articulation of the neg alternative coming out of the NR. I don't have it explicitly extended. And while I think that I have a threshold for extensions, and I think that there probably is a risk that the alternative solves, I don't know how good that risk specifically is. Because I think there are a few arguments that are interacting there. The first one is this argument for why the AF removes guns from white people who are already committing trans violence. So I think that the AF might have some risk of solvency. I'll get to the ontology arguments in a second. But then the second claim is that these arguments that are framed as impact terms for why I think there is some sort of access to or why. The ownage of even if the state is bad and even if it's not the perfect kind of solution, owning guns is no better. And then there's the arguments about the criminogenic atmosphere that I think are reasons for why that neg or the status quo world might endorse these arguments. Now the alternative might no link from these. I just don't have a sufficient no link of these arguments. So I'm not sure confident the alternative solves. I think there's a risk of the AF solving based off the AF directly removing these causes. So then the last question becomes how I evaluate the political ontology arguments and then the perm argument. So first off, I don't think you win the perm just because you can see that it's severance. The problem is that I'm not exactly sure what the alternative is doing in this case, so it doesn't end up impacting too much in the round anyway. The political ontology claim, I think it could outweigh, and I think there just could have been more explanation coming out of the NR and the 2AR for how these claims interact with the legal change that the AF talks about. But I think that the AF at least wins a reasonable root cause claim that the criminogenic atmosphere of needing guns creates an arms race, which causes the problems that the AF talks about. And then so I think that the ontology claim is not definitively one enough, and again, I'm not sure how the alternative addresses this ontology claim. So at that point, I'm willing to buy that the alternative probably isn't resolving much, whereas at least the AF is solving offense on case, and so I go on the case.
Cool. You want me to go? I'll go. So I think that Chris is correct that there could have been a lot more explanation on the role of the ballot and the way that this works. at the end of this round for me, I think that the biggest thing that happens is that the 2AR doesn't direct a lot of response to the NR positions. And I don't think that they were really necessarily hard things to do, but it would have been time consuming to get through some of this. And so I can't really argue with the strategy, Felix, but let me kind of tell you how I come out and how I got there. Unlike Chris, I think you still need to answer this question about whether or not there's solvency on case. I think coming out of the cross-ex of the 1AC, there is a question in my mind about whether or not these authors actually support your form of what it is that you're doing. And while I understand lawn darts, because I played with them as a kid, I don't necessarily know that that's going to solve the problem with guns. But there is a critical admission, I think, in cross-ex, which is the cops are still going to go door to door. And I think that gives me the link to Gorovich on case, which gives me a reason why I start thinking about why I need to prefer the y'all. I think that gives me enough of a net benefit against the case, and I think that number two here is that when I'm looking at your solvency, I've got a question mark in my head. So my understanding after the NR is that it is a structural ontology that matters, and it's try or die for clear. And I don't have a response, weighing, comparison, anything of the sort in the 2AR. I think that you needed to give me 5 seconds, 10 seconds that says, you know, this is nonsense. If anything like that would have helped. I have your perm, and I go back to your perm coming out of the AR, and it's basically perm do both without a lot of explanation. And I've got some pretty good responses coming out of the NR about why you can't do that. And if I'm in this structural ontology mindset, it's really difficult for me to say I can perm and do both. And he's got some good responses here in the NR. For example, he says that nothing says legal change will solve. And he talks about the more policing again, which I think again goes back to the cross-examination. And I agree with you that doing something like the Consumer Product Safety Commission on a recall of bad toys or pesticides or whatever is an interesting way to approach this. But if they're still going door to door, I have some risk over here that I don't think that you respond to, and I think that the answer in cross-ex was not a good one. Other issues, I think that he extends Stanley. There's no 2AR response to the Stanley evidence, and the fact that it's illogical. You talk about fiat and the illusory, but I understood this to be an extension of the case turns on the solvency question, and maybe that was, maybe it was new, but I needed more of an explanation other than it's just new. So at the end of this round, I'm kind of looking at this and I'm thinking to myself that I've got very little going on in very little going on case because of cross-examination. And if the role of the ballot is to understand and educating the judges, then the structural ontology is the thing that I'm supposed to be looking at. And I think that the neg does a better job of handling that given the nature of the arguments that were presented. And I honestly think that you did a really good job, but I think that you just needed to do a little bit more in the 2AR in order to pick up my ballot.
Okay.
So it's a good debate. I agree with the solvency issues. I think especially with Gorovich, that in combination with like the answers given in cross-examination, I'm really not clear on the AF not being a form of criminalization until the 1AR, and that's problematic. Like I think there needs to be some allusion to that in the AC, or maybe even ideally in cross-examination. But even then, I think you are still giving them kind of pretext to go and interact with different communities of color. So even if they're not arresting them for gun charges, I think there is increased risk of interaction, which could eventually lead to more arrests. So I think he's winning. I think there's a potential dissent there. I also think solvency is kind of muddy, but I end up thinking that debate, even if you win that debate, I think there's a couple of things that are troubling. First, I guess my first point of departure from Chris's RP is what role Reed Brinkley plays. So first, I don't have an answer in the 1AR to Reed Brinkley in terms of its warrants or in terms of how he's applying it. I think the 1N could be a little bit more explicit in terms of what your vision of debate is outside of just condemning role-playing. I think that would make my decision a little bit easier, but I end up thinking that Reed Brinkley kind of serves as a filter for all the moves that the 1AR and the 2AR try to go through in order to engage in the critique. So I think that ends up, in addition to like the severance concerns that he gets with the permutation, that he raises with the permutation that are not answered, I think Reed Brinkley would also function as a reason why your attempt to engage, do the app with the alternative would be problematic. So I think that's an additional reason not to do the perm. And I think you just don't really, the 2AR and the 1AR don't really interact as well with the Stanley and the legalism stuff. I think you're doing a really good job on the articles argument, but in terms of your attempt to kind of use a legal remedy to apply it to the problems that are highlighted in the critique, I don't see you really interacting with that argument as well. So, and I see this as a completely independent argument. So I think there's a link which also functions as additional dissent permutation. So I think that's where he gets off, and that's where I end up making my decision, is that your approach, your legal approach, just kind of reinforces the problem, and that kind of the approach that you go through the 1AR just kind of an attempt to relink, or just relinks you to the critique. So yeah, it's a good debate.
Okay, thank you all for judging.
Nick. Amazing. Also, I congrats again. Really accommodating. Of course, man.
Probably be around.
Well fought.
Felix, thank you very much.
Weirdest thing that's ever happened.
Oh, that looks expensive. There are no more debates to film. We don't need that. Is my tie like too bad?
You were next to the wall. You were on the other side of the fine.
Yeah, I didn't.